Thank you so much for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and welcome back to another episode of We the Govern. And today we're going to be in our studio here, focused on Washington State, as always. And the stories and topics for you today, I think, are going to be relevant to anybody who cares about what's going on in Washington State. And if you don't live in Washington State, it's probably worth knowing what's happening here, because as beautiful as our state is here, what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington, and it's going to migrate to the state where you've moved to. I almost guarantee it. Now, today's video is mainly going to be focused on 8 stories that I believe you probably missed in Washington State this week. So strap in and then see if you actually have heard these stories already. Now, first, I just want to, before I go too much further, just to remind everybody, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. The more people that subscribe to this channel and share it with others, the more it annoys the political class in our state, and the more frustrated the bureaucrats and the politicians get, and the more likely is that YouTube at some point in time will probably shut this channel down. So until the full censorship world lands on our head, it is important to share this information far and wide so we can get the word out to more people. So let's just jump right in here. Story number 8. So the 8th story in our today's episode, and this is the fact that former Washington State Democrat governors are attacking today's insane Democrats who are in charge of Washington State's budget. A couple weeks ago, you heard of Christine Gregoire, not a good governor herself, but nevertheless, as bad as she was, she's identified the fact that these guys are even worse, and so she's come out from retirement or semi-retirement to point out the fact that the current budget fiasco is completely unsustainable. But she's not the only one, which is what's so amazing. This guy joined her, and I'm covering him right now in this video, but let's look at who he is. And that is our former governor, Gary Locke, from 20 some odd years ago. He's also kind of pulled himself out of retirement, managed to stand in and say, listen, Washington's spending is entirely out of control. He's on the record. He's mocking them. He's attacking them. He's pointing out that they are insane and they are destructive, and it is crazy. I don't think people understand why this is so significant to get 2 former governors of the same political party in Washington State, which is pretty much all former governors that are still alive, just about, that they're all coming out there and they're attacking the existing governors in the Democrat Party here and saying, listen, your spending's entirely delusional and out of control, as they should. I mean, after all, under Gregoire, we're twice as high as that budget was back then. So I think it's worth pointing out, and this is significant. Now, moving on, and of course, Bob Ferguson, the current governor, he's not happy. In fact, you're going to find that with these 8 stories today, Bob Ferguson's not very happy at all, which moves us to story number 7. And this is no surprise for those of you who've been paying the attention to either this channel or anybody else that's awake and not asleep at the wheel. It is officially on the ballot now. That's story number 7. And of course, what I'm referring to here is Brian Haywood and the Let's Go Washington crew with turning in the ballot, the signatures for the initiative to repeal the income tax. That was done last month, and it is official, been made official now that yes, indeed, the initiative is formally going to be on the November ballot. They officially approved it. This isn't a surprise, but also Bob Ferguson is angry again as usual, because this isn't what he wants to deal with, and he knew that Brian Haywood and many of you volunteers, many of you out there, just like me, you were out there collecting signatures, or you're out there picking up sheets, and you were talking about this issue, and over 200,000 extra signatures were turned in. It was obvious that when we turned it in, I said about last month, but it was really just in the first couple days of July here, this month still. And it was obvious it was going to make it to the ballot, and it'll be on the November ballot. So that's story number 7, and it's a big deal, and Bob Ferguson's angry. Speaking of which, Bob Ferguson, story number 6, is absolutely angry, and it's a big deal for him. It's his primary thing to do is get angry, and he had a press conference a couple days ago where he simply spent the whole time attacking Brian Haywood and attacking anybody who would dare actually overturn his foolish income tax. Sure, he's calling it a millionaire's tax for the low-educated, low-IQ people that actually believe him, but really nobody does. Everyone knows it's an income tax on everybody, and that is why the people are not happy about it. Every poll that's been put out shows Washington State rejects this stupid tax, and that's why this initiative will pass, and that's why he had to get I love how they did this headline up here, organized labor to help him, because that's the only group that's essentially putting you got the hardcore leftists and the socialists and the organized labor, and there's not much difference, jumped into this. But what do they mean by organized labor? Do they mean people that actually build airplanes at Boeing, or actually carpenters or anything? No. This is the parasite class, which is the public sector worker unions. These guys are the ones that are actually organized, taking all those hard-won, stolen union dues that they've convinced Bob Ferguson to give them, and they're simply recycling that money back into this campaign to ensure they can keep the bloat growing and the taxes going, because they expect a profit and success from this. The Washington Education Union and the SEIU are the primary players here with the big, deep pockets, and of course they're behind Bob Ferguson, and he's not happy because he has to spend all that money trying to defeat this initiative, which is very popular in Washington State right now, and he has to spend all his time attacking Brian Haywood, and he doesn't mind attacking Brian Haywood, but he's mad that he has to spend his time doing this. He'd rather be imposing more taxes. So that's an important story for this week. Story number 5. Moving across the state of Washington, this one's about Spokane under Brown continues to go down. Now, it may rhyme, but unfortunately, it is a rhyming sort of story, because every time you elect a significant Democrat, particularly a corrupt one like this, and they get into public office, decline and destruction in your environment and city is the inevitable and certain result almost every time. Spokane is demonstrating this regularly since they elected former Department of Commerce Chair Lisa Brown, former state senator Lisa Brown, and one of the most corrupt people in the former Inslee administration, who basically weaponized the Department of Commerce as a kickback and bribe machine for her future political agenda, with the grants that she sent to Spokane to help buy her way into that very hard-fought mayoral race. So now that she's running Spokane, under Spokane, Lisa Brown is definitely sending that city down. This is including deficits and tax increases, and kind of an inevitable, predictable result. Anybody who's been paying attention to what's happening in Spokane since Lisa Brown's been elected knows that there's been a decline in every measurable quality of life, and she is directly and personally responsible for it. She definitely endorses and promotes the most corrupt aspects of the homeless industrial complex that she can get in there, certainly higher taxes, and just everything else that a usual Democrat from Washington State usually pushes. And it just should be no mystery. Listen, this is predictable. Nobody watching these guys and knowing who they are when they're running for office could actually expect any other outcome. But sometimes it's just more elaborate and obvious than other times. And I've been to Spokane quite a bit lately, and anybody who spent any time, if you saw Spokane 10 years ago and you look at it now, you would hardly recognize it. And she has done a great job destroying the city of Spokane and hoping to spread her destruction into Idaho as quick as she can. But nevertheless, good example, and it's worth telling, and I think it's a story that people need to know. Now, story number 4. Why is it again that we need parental notification and transparency in schools? Well, not that we need more examples, but one of the recent examples that just came out is from Edmonds. And in this case, it was a Meadowdale Elementary special ed teacher that the school district right here paid $470,000, basically a payoff, after he'd been caught with a variety of sexual abuse allegations that have come out of his tenure as a good WA employee in that school district. And of course, none of the parents were ever notified. I think this is actually the important and critical thing here, beyond the fact that, listen, there are bad people that'll get into these places and take advantage of children, but you also have situations where when they are caught, or they, especially in this case where it looks pretty egregious, you don't need to pay them off. But worse than that, hide from the parents whose kids were victimized by this, hide from them the truth about what's going on, which is what the school did, and which is what Chris Reichel, Bob Ferguson, Nick Brown, they seem to promote and support, hiding that information. And I will point out that if you don't think that's a good idea, you have the opportunity, once again, thanks to Brian Haywood, as another initiative. It is going to be on the ballot as well, restoring parental rights and transparency in the school system. And that should be one of the more recent stories, but don't worry, there'll be plenty more, even before the November election, that we can talk about that's relevant to this. Moving on to story number 3. Story number 3, Seattle and Spokane aren't the only cities actually seeking self-immolation under dumb, bad governance. Wish I could say they were, but they aren't. And in this case, I'm talking about the city of Olympia. Now, listen, I've mocked the city of Olympia for a decade and a half now. They deserve much more than I've sent their way, but they're run by clowns and not very sharp people. Certainly, this is very true. But despite the fact that you can't find a Republican anywhere there to vote for the most part, they had an initiative on the ballot to increase the minimum wage last year to $20 or more, and it actually added all kinds of really crazy restrictions on business, and everybody realized that if this thing passed, it was going to destroy whatever was left of the business climate in downtown Olympia, which granted is mostly government, but they knew this was going to happen. And the voters of Olympia, and I think this is worth pointing out, voters of Olympia shot that thing down. It only got 44%, which is amazing in a place like Olympia, and it was totally defeated. That's a sizable margin. But of course, the city council doesn't care. They decided that even though the voters rejected this dumb idea, they're going to see if they can find a way to backdoor it into the city anyway and help facilitate the terminal decline in the city of Olympia as well. Just like Spokane, just like Seattle, when you elect these guys and you put clowns in government, it always turns into a circus, and it's never good for the people who live there. Moving on to story number 2. Now, this is always interesting to me because the story here is basically you can't handle the truth. This is basically, I know that's something that came out of a movie in Hollywood a while ago. Which actor was that? That's okay. We'll just simply talk about the politicians that say that. In this case, it's the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs. And he's basically not very happy here and put out this statement here a couple days ago. Very angry that Harmeet Dillon, the Department of Justice, has come to him and said, listen, you have non-U.S. citizens and illegals on the voter rolls today in Washington state, and if any of them vote, you're going to be held personally and criminally liable under the statutes that exist. And of course, he's not happy about it. The reason why he's not happy about it is that Steve Hobbs does absolutely nothing to clean up the voter rolls in the state and encourages and looks the other way for the corrupt voter rolls that we do have. Listen, I've talked about this for many, many years now, longer than most people on this subject, with a lot more firsthand evidence than anybody else seems to have. And what happens is they just don't want to look at it. And anytime you find a way to demonstrate that these issues are happening, then the first thing they do is change the law so that you can no longer expose the truth. Part of what makes this kind of ridiculous when you go back and you actually look at this presentation here that he put out, and this is just the mealy-mouthed sort of statement that you expect from somebody that's not very serious about either their job or responding to the Department of Justice, is they pretend that somehow they're protecting somebody's privacy by not providing this information to the feds. Now, Trump came out and obviously said there was 250,000 non-U.S. citizens that were found on voter rolls in 4 states. Those are states that actually wanted to cooperate. Believe me, there's a lot more in Washington, Oregon, and California. The sad thing about this is that Steve Hobbs is lying when he says this. He regularly provides this information all the time right now to a group called ERIC. It's an outside organization run mostly by leftists, poorly run, that encourages keeping non-U.S. citizens on the voter rolls. So he shares this information all the time. Your information isn't safe with him or anybody else in the state government. The Department of Licensing certainly opens the back door so anybody can have their ID stolen all the time. So why would Steve Hobbs make such a stand here? He's angry because he's really not allowed to expose the truth about how many non-U.S. citizens are on the voter rolls, even if nothing else. Listen, this is just the least amount of work that you could do to try to clean up the voter system in Washington state. And of course, he's not happy about it because you can't handle the truth. And the last thing they want you to know is the truth about what they're actually doing here, which is one of the reasons why, although he does play Dungeons & Dragons and dress up like Captain America on a regular basis, true story, you can look it up in previous videos. He's proud of it. He puts it on his own social media feed. He ignores fraud whenever it happens, whether that's in Pasco with the apartment manager there that was caught falsifying the loose ballot system with no chain of custody that gets sent all over the place, taking former tenant ballots and voting for them. Listen, this kind of stuff goes on all the time. If there's one group of people that will not look for it or find it, it's going to be Steve Hobbs and the crew he runs. They don't care. They don't want to find it. They're going to pretend to look the other way. And every time we get a glimpse behind the curtain and find a problem, their only response is to shut the door and hide and make it less transparent than it was before. This is the only way they operate, and it's very sad and unfortunate, and it's because they don't believe you can handle the truth, which moves us on to the final story that you might have missed this week, and it really has more to do with the fact that Donald Trump got up and did his presentation on Thursday about the problems with the voter rolls. One of the things that Donald Trump mentioned was that China was hacking into the American voter roll systems and trying to influence and affect elections. But this is a final story here, is that in Washington state, we're saying that we don't need China to help us cheat in elections here. And I think it's important to point this out, and they might be right. Nick Brown, certainly, and angry Bob Ferguson, who certainly didn't want to be talking about this either. There's a lot of reasons why Bob Ferguson's not happy this week. He came out with one of the more foolish and ignorant statements that I've ever seen Nick Brown come out with, and that's saying a lot. He is pretending that the chain of custody problem is no problem at all, even though there's not a living soul on planet Earth that can actually figure out what the heck happens to these ballots when they get sent out. Nobody really knows. It's not like they're tracked. Nobody really pays attention. They end up in homeless camps. They end up spread like confetti throughout Washington state. There is no guarantee that anybody who actually got that ballot that when it gets sent back in, assuming it was the one sent in, that it was actually filled out. And there is a unique and as particularly significant lack of interest on their part in ever getting to the bottom of any of the mysteries that we do seem to uncover on a regular basis. One of the funny things that Nick Brown actually said in this video on X is he pretends that there's transparency in our election system. There is not. Nick Brown and Bob Ferguson and the crony crew that they hang out with have done everything they can over the last, say, 18 years or so, to close every possible transparency door that would potentially exist so that people could actually vet the election system. Let me give you a couple examples. Nick Brown and Bob Ferguson specifically helped make sure that you could no longer get jury pool rejection letters, because those jury pool rejection letters contained thousands of non-U.S. citizens who were regularly put in the jury pool and asked to come in and sit on a jury, and they said, we're not registered, we're not U.S. citizens, but they were registered to vote. Once we were writing stories about that and exposing the non-U.S. citizens, well, what did they do? They made it illegal to actually get access to those records. They made it illegal to get access to cast vote records. They made it illegal to get access to the ballots. You can't see the ballots. You'll never be able to see the ballots. You are not allowed to look at those ballots. And the problem is the state legislature also said the digital ballots and clear vote system and others basically are the ballots, not the paper ballots. So there's really no connection anymore between those paper ballots and the digital ballots, and they won't let you audit the difference between the two. So every single time you find a way, I did an article, what was it, last year, that was exposing how many Washington state voters did not have Social Security numbers or driver's licenses associated with their voter records. And what was the reaction of the Secretary of State's office? Immediately was to go in and make it illegal for me to ever see that, have that information presented to me by an auditor's office ever again, and to have criminal penalties on those auditors' offices for daring to expose the truth about what's going on in the voter rolls. These guys are not truth tellers in any sense of the way. They're liars when it comes to this issue. They have spent their careers lying about this subject. At best, they're incredibly ignorant about it, but most of the time they're just deceptive. So I think this is a significant story, and to some extent, when Donald Trump came out and said that, it was almost like baiting these guys to come out and make stupid statements and get angry about it, which is what happened. Listen, Chuck Schumer said it best when he said that keeping illegals on the voter rolls is a critical part, and non-U.S. citizens on the voter rolls and giving them the right to vote is the key way that they can keep political power. These guys know it. Their political allies know it, and that's why they're pushing that story. So those are the 8 stories. You might have caught them in Washington State. You might not have. And listen, Washington State's a beautiful place. Whether you're at Snoqualmie Falls or any other place in the state, anybody who's visited Washington, and particularly those of us who live here, we know how beautiful it is. But we also know that while our state may be beautiful, our political choices have frequently been ugly. And the political bureaucrat and the grifter class that we have here is ugly too. So that's how it is. That's where the stories I hope that you will learn a little bit more by knowing exactly what's happened in Washington State. Let me know what stories you think I missed. Put them in the comments section down below. I always appreciate that. I do try to read every comment you leave and get back to you as much as possible. But for those of you who do live here in Washington State, and if you live in King County and you've gotten 10 or 15 ballots at home, make sure you send them all in. I can't tell which one they're going to actually count, or if they're going to count all of them, or if they'll ever get there. But at least you can participate in the election process. Listen, showing up is a big part of being involved in the election process. Voting is the smallest part of showing up, but it's still an important part. Even as screwed up and as problematic as our voting system might be, and many of us are trying to work on this, please make our life just a little bit easier. Participate, get it in there so that the other work that we're trying to do around the system can have some impact. You make it a little bit easier for us by helping. So get out there and vote. Nick Brown said, vote like you mean it. Yeah, no kidding. Do vote like you mean it. And definitely make sure that you vote for good people, not the crazies who are doing terrible things to the state. But again, ultimately, the future belongs to those who show up. I say that all the time. So get out there and show up, and I will get back to the stories that you tell me you think I missed in the next video that we do here at We the Government.